Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Sonic Frontiers, where we're going to use some heart-shaped crystals to free Amy Rose.
Well, free, sort of.
Of course.
Totally a platonic interaction, just to be clear on that.
Does this game ship Sonami? How do you... Sonami?
Whoa, can you say that?
Ian Flynn definitely does, but this game is kind of like romance neutral in the sense that, for once, Amy kind of drops her stalkerish behavior and becomes a bit level-headed. Part of that is because she's in a dream state, so she's kind of like high on fumes the entire time. I think all the characters are.
Have you ever sniffed a Sharpie marker, Sonic?
What?
I just did.
I'm kind of like exaggerating that a little bit, but if you talk to her for some of the optional scenes, she does describe that she's in kind of a dreamlike state. So she feels a bit weird.
Schrodinger's Amy.
Anyway, you might have seen that Sonic got some weird zappy stuff like absorbed into his hand during that scene. That's gonna happen every time he frees one of his friends, and it sort of coalesces into this nothing plot where he almost dies but then gets revived by the power of friendship.
Hey, damn, that sucks anyway.
Interesting bit of designer trivia there. There was supposed to be more to that plot, and there are like audio files referencing this and stuff. Sonic was supposed to start like getting so far gone by the end of that whole thing that he started to have to verbally remind himself that he was trying to protect his friends and whatever. Like, it was implied that he was losing his memory while he was being corrupted, and that would have been so interesting, but it seems like they decided that was a bit too dark.
So is this like makes him an asshole Venom like symbiote style, or like he forgets who he is Kingdom Hearts style?
The closest thing I can compare it to, and I know this is kind of a weird pull, you guys, I think it was the third Never-Ending Story, where every time the kid made a wish, he had to exchange a memory for it, and like by the end of it, he was almost like pretty like catatonic. And just barely like living on before like something saves the day, this sort of thing. That's kind of what I think of it as if they went through with that idea.
I never watched anything other than the first one.
Never-Ending Story.
Yeah.
Now that's a name I've not heard in a long time.
Never-Ending Series.
I was gonna say that the third one is a movie I haven't seen in close to 30 years.
I'm pretty sure it was either the third or the second one, but either way, like the idea of it sounds similar. I would have liked if they at least kept some sort of visual reference that Sonic was slowly losing it.
Well, they do because like his idle animation.
Not really. His idle animation changes
from island to
I'm
island.
talking about the red corrupty shit that grows on his arm. That should have been spreading like a plague.
Like in Metroid Prime.
Throughout his body.
Like in
like in Corruption. You're absolutely right. Like in Corruption, but they don't do that. All it just makes it look like Sonic has a headache. Like that's it.
It would have been neat, yeah, if like he got all crackly every so often. But I think like I think it's like kind of an open secret that this game was a little bit rushed, so they had to cobble together a lot of stuff with what time they had. And I think
Sonic Rush was for the DS.
I think one of the things they didn't want to spend time on while they were doing that was like retooling the way Sonic worked in gameplay from island to island, you know? So all you get is the idle animation. Oh, okay. So one of the constant irritations I had during my first playthrough of this game was that I never fucking knew where half of the goddamn seeds would spawn when I did a map challenge. So I'd have to swivel my camera around, and I'm like, okay, where did this one show up? Is this one close to me, or is it far? By the end of the playthrough, I sort of figured it out, but
well, the first thing I do whenever I complete a challenge is that ever spawns a power or defense seed, I give the camera a quick 360 to see if I can catch it at a glance and then just go right towards it.
The thing about the power and defense seeds though is that they eventually vanish. They are a respawning resource that you can get infinite amounts of from the fishing game. So
if they do vanish, it takes a long fucking time, because one point I did lose track of one after completing a challenge, and it was 10-15 minutes later where I went back to the area and it was still on the floor.
I think it depends on like how far away you get. Like if you go into like a cyberspace level or something, it'll go away.
Maybe if you like reload the area, sure, but there was a time where I left one on the ground for a long time and it was still there. I was actually shocked.
You are right, but like like that applies to all the power-ups in the game, the gears, the hearts. Most of the time when that happens, it's because you killed an enemy and they randomly dropped one and you didn't see it, and then you happened to pass by in the other direction. And the infuriating thing about that is even the enemies that are deliberately placed in platforming challenges to be homing attack stepping stones can drop the collectibles.
Yeah, happened to me a lot in the third island, where you're locked in the 2D as
Whenever
well.
you finish a platforming challenge, turn that camera around and check to see if any of the homing attack stepping stones dropped a cog or something, because it's gonna happen at least 3 times per playthrough.
Is this City Escape?
No.
This is literally Generations Green Hill. Like,
Oh.
it's the same layout, minus some of the interesting bits.
And the drift.
The problem when it's ripping off level layouts from something like Generations is that I have Generations on the same computer I'm playing this on, and I can play these level layouts anytime I want with better controls. So,
Well, when it calls back to Adventure 2, Ted, I think it'll be really obvious. I think you'll be able to.
I'm looking too hard for it, I guess.
Yeah.
So, okay. Now I remember.
Is
that.
this the bite of 87?
City Escape is in the game, though.
Oh, best game ever. 10 out of 10.
So is Rail Canyon.
From
And Green
Heroes.
Forest. And Metal Harbor.
No, Skyrail.
Skyrail, yeah.
Oh.
Why did I say Rail Canyon? Why did I say
How
Rail
dare
Canyon?
you get Skyrail and Rail
you
Canyon
wanted to instinctively
confused.
think of the worst level of Sonic Heroes besides
Maybe
Pool
it's
Station.
because Skyrail is a level full of rails in a canyon. I don't know.
How
You're
dare?
not wrong. but-
Okay, I have to wonder though. Like Sega knows, right? The we are tired of Green Hill. Please take a break thing.
Yes.
Like has only been a running joke in the series since like what 2009.
They probably do, and like the asset reuse here is clearly a time-saving measure. Like they didn't have much time to add content to the game, so they did what they could with very little. I think, though, if they were going to do asset reuse for the memory-based cyberspace stages, they should have gone whole hog. They should have just pulled
Yes.
assets from more games.
No, Whole Hog is a Crash Bandicoot.
I mean, that would have worked in the sense of like, because again, we're at the point. Are we gonna play as Eggman? Are we
No.
doing Eggman Adventure? Oh.
Okay, one of the awkward elements of story progression is that the cutscenes happen as you progress through collectibles. Most of the cutscenes are unlocked by deliberately going to a place and using your collectible items to activate a cutscene. But the Eggman scenes in particular seem to happen when you collect certain collectibles, like keys. So what will often happen, because I'm doing this very thorough and collecting a bunch of keys and stuff all at once, is that I'll get one Eggman cutscene that triggers. Then it'll fade to black, fade back into gameplay, and then fade to black again, directly into another Eggman cutscene. And it's just like, okay. Now, Eggman in this game is very subdued compared to meta-era Eggman, who is very jokey all the time. And it's a little hard. It's a little hard to get used to, but I think I like it. Overall.
I did like
I love
I
it.
do like the slightly okay, I get what you mean about physics exploits. But like the note to self, don't admit that to anyone. Like that's a like the kind of
He feels closer to Sonic Adventure 2 Eggman than he's felt in a long time, and that's nice.
that's the kind of like small gag that you kind of expected, that you kind of, not that they really wrote like that in Sonic Adventure 2 again, because the script is really awkwardly written, but there's the occasional lighthearted
A lot
line
of the merits of Sonic Adventure 2's story get lost because they wrote it in English, then translated it to Japanese, then translated it to English again. And that's the script we got.
You could take Paradise Lost, put it in Google Translate, and go from Latin to French to English, and it probably wouldn't read very well.
Five Guys.
Yeah. But anyway, when a lot of people complained about like the jokiness of Sonic Colors and Friends, it's not that they don't want Sonic to be lighthearted. Like, I mean, I'm sure some people said that, but it's not like Sonic needs to be freaking Handmaid's Tale and only be dour all the time, but it's more just a matter of sincerity and stakes in that the characters need to care about what's going on, and there needs to feel like what you're doing matters. You can still have fun, you know. It's not supposed to be not fun at Sonic, but you know, you can do both.
Even for me, I think the comedy in Sonic in the Sonic meta era started to wear thin after a while, and part of that is because of just my personal tastes are. I prefer comedy to have a serious core to wrap itself around, and especially in Lost World, that didn't seem to happen very often, unless Eggman was having a moment where he was fantasizing about like strangling his Eddie. Things got surprisingly grim unexpectedly for very short spans of time in that game, and it came off as a bit jarring, but also a little awesome. But like the thing about like the Sonic Adventure games is that when you set aside the awkwardness of how those stories were presented with their weird animation quirks and translation issues, they were fundamentally serious stories with the fun cartoony hedgehog shit wrapped around the seriousness, sort of like the bread on a sandwich, you know? This is a weird analogy, and I'm not sure where it came from. But, you know, that's the kind of Sonic story that I think we should be aiming for. I'm not saying that the adventure games did it particularly well, because honestly, I still think those stories are kind of a mess, but the general direction, I guess, is what I'm saying, was you know.
Well, I think it goes back into the matter of what I was saying earlier about sincerity, over the style of the plot and the writing, Google Translate or not.
Sincerity is such an unquantifiable aspect of writing, especially in the case where it's a video game and the story is always kind of there for ulterior motives anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, you know, it would have been better if it, you know, killed the robot, but it didn't do
Kind of
anything.
would be, yeah. I thought I didn't follow up with an attack because I thought that was what was going to happen, but it
It's
didn't.
like, wait, that was awkward. We're gonna do it again.
Have you ever had a moment in Zelda, Twilight Princess, where in that game, when you beat an enemy and then put your sword away, if you do it at the right time, Link will do like the cool flippy shit and then put the sword away.
Yeah.
But have you ever tried to do it, but the enemy's still there and mid animation they try to punch you?
It's like, I'm still alive, dickhead.
That's like what I'm imagining right now.
Okay, so combat in Sonic Frontiers has a nice, okay, fun basis to it, but it's also like not all the way there either.
So that was actually something I was surprised to see, period, was real combat. Because that's never been something that, like, Sonic's ever really done. I guess aside from, like, Werehog and, like, I guess Shadow the Hedgehog maybe kind of counts.
Wait, it's funny that you mentioned Werehog specifically, because my biggest critique with the combat in this game is that it's way too button mashy.
It looks a little button mashy.
It kind of is,
And
yeah.
while you get later skills by upgrading the skill tree, a lot of them are triggered by like holding a specific trigger and holding like or pressing square, triangle, and circle. And my problem is that these things never really combo well off of each other.
It's not a very intuitive control scheme for the special attacks.
No.
It kind of feels a little bit like I was playing River City Girls Zero like yesterday, and you do your special moves by holding the block button and then hitting a specific attack button, and it's like there's always a delay to it. So it always feels a bit off to do in the middle of combat, and you can never really time it quite the way you want to. It kind of feels like that, only...
So it's like, strangely enough, like if we were to like bring up the Werehog as a comparison, I think the Werehog did combat better for as much as I don't think the game needed it. But if we're like just breaking it down, categorically speaking, I think this game probably could have taken a page or two from the Werehog combat.
Maybe. I don't know if that's necessarily a good...
I'm not saying that Sonic needed stretchy arms and shit like that. I'm just talking about having a combo game similar to the Werehog, but Sonic still does very Sonic-esque moves.
What I'm trying to say is that I don't necessarily think that that's a good combination, because this combat is very Devil May Cry, and Werehog was very deliberately God of War, and I don't really think those two styles mix all too well.
Well, that's what I'm saying. It's like, you take pages from it. I'm not saying it has to beat it, but take notes from it.
Well, yeah, I think, but if they're gonna take notes from anything, I think they should just like lean further into Devil May Cry and do some pause combos or something, because like I don't know, Wait, did the werehog use pause combos? I forget. I never use those combos for fucking anything because the enemy variety in the werehog stages was awful.
I know you paused a lot to hit those QTEs.
Yes, I did. And it's like the best way to get S ranks in that game because like the S rank system actively punishes you for trying to master the werehog combat. But okay, so the combat in Sonic Frontiers is very undercooked. Like in very obvious ways it's undercooked. That's unfortunate, but it's like it's still got a fun core to it. Like once you master what's there, you can do some really like stylish shit just for fun. And I can see this combat system being fleshed out into something better if they keep doing that. I think
for the next game, what they need to work on is just making these combos and maneuvers flow better into one another. Because as of now, it's just perform one maneuver, then perform another maneuver.
Yeah, exactly. But I think the real strength of this combat is that unlike the werehog, it's not sectioned off into its own slow-paced gameplay style. It straight up comes straight out of fast-moving exploration gameplay. And what that means is even the roll from the drop dash is an attack. So you can open on the drop dash if you want, or just, you know, throw a drop dash into a combo for the fuck of it, because why not? Nothing's stopping you. But, like, the point is, you can enter combat from any other part of the game and have it feel like a natural transition. That's like the only... It's like, this is the only time where combat in a Sonic the Hedgehog game hasn't felt like an awkward breaking of the pace. Because they've been doing mandatory combat encounters and shit since Sonic Heroes. And, like, holy shit, the combat in Sonic Heroes is so awful. It's just like every time I play that game, I get to my first, like, you have to fight this big robot to progress moment, and I'm just like, oh no. And then I switch to Knuckles because he destroys everything, but,
I think in the case of Frontiers, it's also a very take it or leave it sort of approach, because I think I personally think you're overselling the idea of the combat. I don't think it's that fun because by the second or third island, I'm ignoring a lot of shit.
Well, yeah, I don't think it's that fun. I just think it is fun. Like when you decide to do combat, it flows well with the rest of the gameplay. And yeah, you can skip it by the end. You can skip a lot of it by the end, but the combat that is there is fun while you're doing it. And I think that if they fleshed out what they have here better in whatever the follow-up to this game is, they could make it an even more natural and rewarding part of the gameplay loop.
I think the only part of combat that flows naturally with Sonic's inherent speed and fast gameplay is the side loop. Like every other bit of combat, no, I don't think flows naturally at all. Actually,
yeah. I was gonna ask, like, how is the side loop? Like, does it
it's that's fun?
It's fine. Okay.
Yeah.
Like it's
fine.
like
It
Knight's
functions.
circle-y thing.
Yeah, essentially.
Okay.
Paralooping, essentially. You know, outside of like using one or two combat maneuvers, I'm assuming you're not button mashing everything to death. Assuming the enemy even lets you do that, because starting with this island or the second island, you'll get those enemies that put like those frame one shields up.
Those shields are annoying, but
I mean, there are ways to get around it, yeah, but nothing that I would categorize as free flowing. It's like there's a lot of stop and go to Sonic's combat.
I didn't necessarily mean that the combat itself was free flowing. I mean that you can flow easily in and out of speed and combat as if they're part of the same game rather than awkward like attachments from different gameplay styles. Like at any time during any combat sequence, you can just drop to the ground and start boosting and run around the enemies and do whatever. You're not switching to a completely different gameplay style when enemies enter the screen. Although, when enemies are around and you want to interact with an object, that presents a problem all of its own. But we'll get to that because it's going to become a problem later. Okay. No, you know what? I might as well explain what I mean now. Okay, there are enemies that are just one-hit kill, homing attack, stepping stones that are like positioned within platforming challenges, right? Sometimes you get close enough to those platforming challenges that the game registers that there was an enemy present and switches the game into combat mode. And what that means is basically you can do anything you want to, but certain items that you would want to interact with to, like, grab something, for example, you can't interact with them anymore until you kill the enemies. So you have to awkwardly work your way up to that platforming segment or just run far enough away that combat mode disengages in order to get that thing to work. I'm sorry, I need to mute my mic again.
So, like, speaking of said gameplay loop, it kind of just feels like you wander around and then you find a mini game or platforming thing, and then you do it and you get a shiny thing, and then you find another one, and then you keep going.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
Basically.
This game is all about collecting. Like, there's a hierarchy of collectibles in Sonic Frontiers. Like, the most important things are the vault keys, because those unlock the Chaos Emeralds.
And this is something that the tutorial does not convey to you at all. In fact, nothing in the game conveys this to you until you have your first, like, Starbit shower. But anyway, 90% of the game's collectibles are not required for completion because they respawn every time you have a Blood Moon moment. So you really just need to collect what you need to get where you need to go. And you can do that in whatever order you want. You don't have, like... Okay, a full 100% playthrough of this game might even ignore, like, 2/3 of the platforming challenges throughout the levels.
Oh, no, speedrunners are going to do skips as much as possible, and if they need to get collectibles for, like, a 100% run, they're just going to spam big.
Yeah, that it probably is the fastest way to do it, but what I mainly want to convey is that this game, on paper, when you look at what the gameplay loop presents you with, all these tokens and keys and cogs and shit, it sounds like it should be exhausting to complete, right? Because there's so much of it. But you don't need to do even half of what's here to get everything that the game considers
And that
completion.
That's what I was really worried about at first.
What, that
Like,
you'd have to do every single minigame?
You'd have to
and
do
platform?
every single obstacle.
Which obstacle courses have I missed? Which ones have I not missed? Which ones have I done?
It looks like I missed all of them. Yeah, that was my initial fear at first. Thankfully, it's not.
And that would be a nightmare because it's really difficult to tell the obstacle courses apart from one another because goddamn. But, like, you don't need to bother with it. It's like completion is down to map completion and doing all these side stories and getting all the cyberspace keys and Big's fishing if you really want to do that. Although that just sort of completes itself as you grind, so it barely even counts.
Yeah. So outside of the vault keys, there are also a shitload of what the game calls memory tokens, and these are also important because these unlock more cutscenes for you to interact with things. These are ultimately necessary because after you witness more enough cutscenes, you unlock I think it's always the final 2 Chaos Emeralds.
Yes.
Essentially.
Also, I can't help but watch Squid in the background. La 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 la.
You unlock the Chaos Emeralds by progressing to the main story cutscenes, which are always the well-directed question mark cutscenes.
Yeah, that looked barely better than like a Nintendo DS GBA anime portrait thing.
These standing around talking to each other cutscenes are just side conversations that you can unlock, and they have like no direction at all because they're just conversations.
I think the color of the icon on the map is also important too. If it's a colored icon, it's an important story.
Well, the game always directs you toward whatever your current main plot objective is, so you'll always know where that is. It's always flashing at you, but the side stories are just icons on your map that you go to and unlock. And I do recommend going to them and listening to the conversations because they are some of the more interesting character moments. But like,
there's actually it's how you get more info of your surroundings and the backstory.
Just following the main plot of this game without any of the optional stuff is going to leave you with a fairly bare story experience. But like the story itself, okay, it's kind of hard to describe what's good about the Sonic Frontiers story because when you think about it, it's a really minimalistic plot, and it has literally the same plot structure as Sonic 3 and Knuckles. Arrive on island, collect Chaos Emeralds, do a climactic tower challenge, and then you're in the climax and you're fighting the final boss. Okay. And that was a game with basically no plot. So this is a game with basically no plot.
That game also had there's a dick, and then also, that dick was not a dick after all.
No, he was still a dick, but he was a misinformed
When
dick.
I say that this story has the same structure as Sonic 3 and Knuckles, I'm including Knuckles in that, although Knuckles is not the Knuckles of this story. Sage is the Knuckles of this story.
Okay, so there is a dick in this story. Got it.
Not really. I mean, she doesn't spring traps on you and laugh. She does sort of sick a few giant robots on you at one point, but like,
Tomato.
she's a lot more likable than Knuckles doesn't chuckle.
Yeah, but she's not being manipulated though.
She's not being manipulated, but she's also not really. She is acting on her own for her own reasons, you know.
Yeah.
And then by the end of the game, you join up with her and reach an understanding, and you know.
Sorry, sick Davis on you, Sonic.
Sorry I burned down your village. Here's some gold.
I like
thanks.
I like Sage. Sage is good. Sage is probably
Is Sage the one from the trailers?
Yeah.
Okay.
We're gonna meet her pretty soon. Actually.
Yeah, I've been holding off getting the Chaos Emeralds because the Chaos Emeralds on Island 1 in particular sort of...
I heard him. Where is he?
It's the squid.
There he
Wait a
is.
minute. Hold on. Oh, wait. Hold on.
cutscene
How'd you
hasn't-
do that? You didn't get the fucking surprise squid
It's
thing.
because I'm in the middle of a timer event.
Wait, is
I
this guy
see.
literally
Okay.
named Squid? Like,
Yes.
Yes. This guy's name is Squid.
Oh, like in
The
Rocket
best-
Power.
He's the best. Oh God.
And all the mini bosses have a dramatic intro splash scene.
Oh yeah,
when
like
you
it was
encounter them.
Ninja, and it's like
Ninja,
yeah.
then Asura. Squid probably has the funniest one because literally him just like looking at the camera.
And he
Like,
goes,
who,
"Squid."
me?
It always has to twist around to look at its own title card, so it's really abrupt and unintentionally comical, but it's also a jump scare whenever it happens, because that thing flies around a really wide area, and it triggers when you get close enough to it, so...
Or when it comes close enough to you.
Yeah. So you can be like getting ready to give Amy like memory tokens to initiate the cutscene,
And then
and the
suddenly
cutscene's
Squid.
over, and suddenly Squid just pops up on the screen.
And there he is in the background still. La la la
Yeah.
la 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 la.
man,
The
Splatoon is a weirder game than I remember it being.
The cutscenes being real time often means that like weather effects and whatever else is going on in the background when you trigger the
La la
cutscene.
la la la.
Yeah, you'll see enemies just floating around in the background of cutscenes, or you'll have this really heartfelt conversation in the middle of a fucking rainstorm, and it's just like, what?
I can't see shit.
Plenty of room to run around.
And you never know how many new
I was like, hey, Amy, that Squid's looking awfully close.
Not to have too much fun finding a way to restore you.
Too much fun finding a way to show you Squid.
I want to take this moment to appreciate just how much less of an annoyance Amy is when she actually sounds like a reasonable human being.
And not Minnie Mouse.
Oh, I think this is some of the best characterization Amy's ever had in the series.
Yeah, and it's not like she's completely like divorced from what she was in previous games. It's more like she finally remembered after 15 games that at the end of Sonic Adventure 1 she had a character growth moment and resolved to become a more independent force. And
I like your choice of words, divorced, because that kind of what reminds what Amy acts like in this game. It's like,
What, like-
the relationship period is over.
What, like Sonic and Amy are? Okay, well, whatever. We'll get to it. I'm sure.
No, I mean nothing bad happens. It's just more like Amy's like tendencies to stalk Sonic is completely absent in this.
Well, I mean, that was
Like, it
always
is
one
just
of the
not a
more
thing.
awkward aspects of her character. You know, I feel
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
being the only female character who makes like,
Regular appearances.
yeah, you know, like having her be a real person and not like one kind of creepy character trait is generally a good thing.
Can we get Blaze back, please?
Amy's one of those characters where you can really tell that the main writing team for Sonic the Hedgehog are usually a bunch of fucking shonen anime writers, because she's just a walking trope the entire time. And now that Ian Flynn is writing her part in the story and her dialogue, she's a lot more like what she is in the comics, which is, yeah, she has a crush on Sonic, but that's just one part of her character, and she's got other stuff going on, you know?
Wait, Lewis, are you telling me that we can have a female character whose personality is not revolved around the men in her life?
Yeah, and we can also have a shonen rival who has more things on his mind than just beating the main character. It's
Amy had a rough transition when she went into the personality dimension.
Okay, so, oh god, you've got 40 keys, man. Link is so jealous.
Yeah.
How many keys do you need to get emeralds?
to be fair. How many keys do you need to get emeralds? Not very many, actually.
It varies.
I'm getting all the keys, like deliberately going out of my way to complete all the missions, and I usually unlock the final emerald for an island about halfway through that.
Wait, hold on a moment. Sega thinks Sonic fans are babies. They just dangle a bunch of keys in front of you and think that'll make you happy.
Okay.
And shiny rocks, too.
So I will give Amy this, though. The transition to her being a more reasonable, less screamy, huggy character didn't actually start here. It kind of started in Sonic Forces, sort of.
I don't even remember what she does in Sonic Forces. That game.
The thing about Amy in Sonic Forces is that her only interaction with Sonic is to scream in relief when she finds that he's okay. But
Yeah.
she barely interacts with Sonic at all in that story, and I feel like it unintentionally makes her seem more sensible in that game because
Only because Sonic isn't around, though, to be fair.
yeah, because
Yeah.
like the only characters that she's interacting with are like the other members of the Resistance and the Avatar character. But like the unintentional effect of that is that it gave her a sort of transitional period where you can sort of retroactively imagine her sort of becoming a little bit more mature and serious during that period of time where Eggman took over the world. And, this game does sort of play off Sonic Forces in some interesting ways at points, so they might actually be playing off that intentionally here.
Yeah, I would agree.
Like, one of the things that this game does, to jump ahead to Island 2, is it plays Knuckles as a commander, Like, he has military experience building fortifications and stuff, which combines his past as Guardian of the Master Emerald with his more recent history as commander of the Resistance, So, that's neat. Also, his memory tokens are the medals from Sonic Forces for some reason.
It's like, why? Why do you do this?
It's like, okay, I have to admire the confidence it takes, at least, to acknowledge Sonic Forces as a narrative element in this game without trying to write around it as if it never existed,
Yeah, like, acknowledge that it happened, learn from it, and improve upon it. Essentially, I think I'd rather it be that way than just sweep it under.
Yeah,
the
and
rug.
it's one of the skills, I think, of the specific kind of writer who is used to bouncing off of another creative team's storylines, which Ian Flynn.
He's used to cleaning up messes.
He is used to cleaning up messes. That was basically his entire first year with the Sonic comic. It's like, maybe that particular era of storytelling for the series wasn't particularly well loved, but there are people who liked those games, and it's nice to at least incorporate things from that era in ways that further the story, rather than just pretending that the era you don't like never happened.
So I have a question, which is normally Lewis's line. So you said in the cyberspace levels, they strip all your upgrades away?
Yeah.
Okay, because Sonic hasn't really seemed that slow in these overworld sections. Like, he seems appropriate for the scale of the game. Like, it hasn't seemed like blazingly fast, but it seemed like appropriate. It seems like he's very sluggish in those cyberspace stages.
The 2D sections in cyberspace are the worst parts of the game, in my opinion.
I think Cyberspace set Sonic to his minimum settings, and that's the thing. It's not just the speed upgrades and stuff you can get. There's also settings in the options menu to alter Sonic's starting speed, top speed, turning speed, that kind of thing. So you can alter his handling to suit your comfort. And at the start of the game, there's action mode and high speed mode, which automatically sets those settings to different, extremes. So you can start not really fast, but you could start faster or slower and sort of adjust as you get comfortable with the game. But the cyberspace stages, I think, are always set to the minimum settings or something close to it. So you're playing with a Sonic who has a pretty low maximum boost speed and not particularly satisfying handling to begin with. And it really hurts some of the level designs from Generations in particular.
That example in particular, because that was just classic Sonic Green Hill from Generations, and Sonic feels so neutered throughout the entire thing.
Yeah.
It's interesting though, because it feels like a backwards Sonic Adventure 1 where the overworld was empty and lifeless and you didn't do anything, and the levels were the fun parts where you felt like you were going fast and doing stuff, and it's just weird to see. It's weird to see it backwards.
Now it's the hub world. It's the main zone, and the regulars and the action stages are special stages. Yeah, it's a very strange direction for Sonic to go. I can't say I dislike it. I just wish Cyberspace was handled better.